Hey guys, All in Crypto here, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another YouTube video. Today I have what I'm hoping is going to be an educational video lined up for you, where we're going to be looking at the Ethereum finality hiccups, or some people are calling it an outage, a sort of halting of the network. We'll get through all that. I don't think it's a massive deal, but I think it could have been, and I also think that if Ethereum was where I think it's going to go to in terms of users, right now with the current user base that it has, it wasn't a massive issue. But if blockchain is really to become, and these proof of stake cryptos are really to become the operating systems of tomorrow, and we're going to see similar adoption with Web3 that we see with Web2, something like this would have been a major issue. But in Ethereum's current state, it hasn't been such an issue. But what I thought I'd do by looking at this is actually not only hopefully provide a little bit of light on what happened with Ethereum, but also a little bit of light in regards to proof of stake cryptocurrencies, because the majority of cryptocurrencies nowadays are proof of stake. And it's my opinion that actually proof of stake in the context of smart contracts and building on top of is superior in a number of ways to proof of work. I think proof of work and proof of stake, there are trade-offs. Proof of work does things better than proof of stake in certain areas and vice versa. However, I think in the context of smart contracts and scalability largely, I think, although there are some proof of work cryptos out there that have achieved scalability, I do think that proof of stake cryptos are going to be more adopted in terms of have value on top of them. You know, if I think the entire value system that we currently have is going to be onboarded and ran via blockchain, I think proof of stake wins out against proof of work in that. I think Ethereum's a great digital gold. However, I'm a lot more bullish, I think, on proof of stake cryptos broadly. Not so I'm not bullish on proof of work. But what I'd hopefully do in this video is educate people about what happened with Ethereum and also proof of stake generally, because as crypto investors, it's important to understand what it is we're investing in. And I think that a lot of people out there still don't really understand proof of stake. Some of you understand it very well. But there's always, I think, room for improvement and education. And looking at what happened with Ethereum when its finality hiccup, I think is actually a good way to give people a better understanding of what's going on here. And hopefully, as I'm reading through this article, you'll be able to see that, yes, okay, it wasn't a major issue at this point where Ethereum's at. But if we had achieved Web3 adoption like we've seen with Web2, it potentially would have been a big issue. You know, with Ethereum sort of traffic that it gets currently, it wasn't that big. People had to wait a little bit longer. But actually, if it was on a big scale and you were seeing remittances perhaps ran on Ethereum or even in multiple layer twos that all tried to reach that finality, that Ethereum didn't offer it at the time until it kind of fixed itself, then that would be a big issue. But there's silver linings here. This is no way a hit piece on Ethereum. I want to look at this article because I thought it was very well put together, and some of the developers' thoughts surrounding it. You know, the price was largely not affected at all. I'm a big believer that actually the market for cryptocurrency is moved by a basket of factors. Liquidity is a big one. It's why we were in a bear market in 2022. And it's actually why I believe we're coming out of one now. But if you want to find out more about that, my general thoughts on the market, the cryptocurrency market broadly in relation to other markets, please do subscribe and check out my daily cryptocurrency market updates. So Ethereum finality hiccups, a fire drill that could have been avoided. Firms' conclusions are forthcoming, but already developers point to Ethereum's decentralization as a key feature preventing a crisis. So we actually had a similar thing take place on Cardano, and actually it was I say similar, totally different in regards to the actual issue. But what we had was block stake pool operators, block producers, validators. We saw an outage of quite a bit of the network. However, because of its scope of decentralization, there was no issue and no blocks were missed. It was business as usual, even though we saw, I think might have even been over 51% of validators get outed. So decentralization is a lot more than just an ethical win. it's also a technical one. And actually, we saw this with Ethereum. Again, this is not a hit piece on Ethereum. I want Ethereum to win. I'm very grateful for Ethereum. I've been a long-term user of Ethereum. I will say this. It's not a pleasurable experience over most other EVM chains in regards to how long it takes, the fees associated, so on and so forth. But that's for another video. So the Ethereum network suffered a hiccup Thursday, one that developers are still parsing for clues. But as a user, you would have hardly noticed. And that's really due to the nature of the volume of users that Ethereum has. It has the most amount of users, barring Bitcoin, of course, in terms of wallets. However, it's nowhere near the scale and scope of where I think it's going. And it's good that these things are happening when they're happening and not further down the road. So at worst, it would have taken slightly longer for a transaction to be included in a block. And there was somewhat lower certainty that a given action would be considered final for about 25 minutes. So 25 minutes, if you were a global operating system, like I think these smart contract protocols are destined to become, and you're transferring and responsible for finalizing trillions in terms of value. Doesn't mean Ethereum's market cap is going to be trillions. It could. It means that there's going to be trillions in terms of value transacted through the blockchain world globally. 25 minutes is a hell of a long time. So it's good that this is all happening when it is. And it is an issue. But I wouldn't say a major one with where the crypto space is at, providing it doesn't persist, and we've seen a sort of fixing of it thus far. However, we're only 3 days away from it, so we'll see what happens. The blockchain's developer community saw the incident as a strong test of the network's resilience. It also served as a further impetus of increasing diversity of the independent software clients that make Ethereum run. So the validators, I think at one point it was over 80% of validators were all using the same software. I think that's now 30-something-ish percent. And actually, because we've seen such a move away from over 50+% using the same software, this actually wasn't a bigger deal as it could have been if you had still the same sort of market share in regards to software being used to run Ethereum. So the extent of Ethereum's client diversity is unique among major blockchains, and a cause championed by members of the community, such as pseudonymous Superfizz, known as the Ethereum Community Health Consultant. I'll have to go and find him on Twitter. Who was one of the first to notice the issue. Barely a blip happened, but it was so uncharacteristic for Ethereum's network that it was a big deal. Anyway, absolutely. It's always a big deal when these things happen. The real media outcry is if there's DApp failures or hacks or things like that take place as a result of it, or double spends, which we haven't had thus far. You just had basically the network not being able to reach consensus for a while. Finality, I believe, is another word that you could substitute for consensus, meaning a conclusion on things. This is the whole revolutionary property of blockchains. They are self-governing systems that are decentrally operated, meaning that they're an immutable record. And that's actually all money and value is, ladies and gentlemen. Very exciting future that I think we've all got ahead of us. So let's move on. The same issue referenced again Friday. So this happened a couple of times, which Superfizz called not surprising, adding these things tend to happen in waves. It's not good that it's happened multiple times, but we will look at potential fixes that have taken place. The precise cause is not yet known, but the effect was a failure to finalize blocks. It's likely to have involved a coincidence of 2 or 3 issues, according to Ethereum blockchain manager at Everstake. During the incident, validators experienced issues with Prism and TQ nodes. Some of these issues were resolved after a restart. It's not because you have to restart the blockchain, by the way, guys. While others, it's very Solana-ish, isn't it? Returned to normal without requiring a restart. Mentioned by Tim Chenko, told Blockworks. Forgive me for the horrific pronunciation of that. Subsequently, validators noticed a spike in CPU usage, which appears to be the second order effect rather than the root cause of the problem. She went on to add, according to Prism developer known as POTUS, several validators, but ultimately a test run were broadcasts in the network. This typically happens when a node that is struggling to be synced attests with an old view of the chain. He then, this is the tweet, talking about the actual incident yesterday, close to 8 p.m. UTC, the Ethereum network lost finality for 25 minutes. Around that time, several valid but ultimately attestations were broadcast in the network. This typically happens when a node that is struggling to be synced attests with an old view of the chain. This stress consensus client in different ways to the point that they specifically, those running on weaker hardware, start struggling to follow the chain. So it's almost like you have a kind of, it actually happens a lot in blockchain. You have a split of these proof of stake. So you've got the one main immutable chain, but you almost have like a chain run off of it. And then it reaches consensus eventually, and that old chain is put to bed, essentially. That actually happens quite a lot with proof of stakes without people even knowing. So when we receive an attention for an old target, we oftentimes need to regenerate the beacon state at that time in order to validate attentions. E.g., if the sign-in validator was supposed to attest at the precise slot, for example. Performing several of these replays at the same time is what stresses the node, CPUs, and bloats memory usage. In Prism, we have a catch. I've seen attentions targets that was designed to address this specific issue. With the increase in validator size and the number of these attentions, specifically during this event, this check quickly filled and forced us to replay several times the same state. Instead of simply increasing a catch, something that would impact memory usage of all users, we decided to release a fix. Will strengthen Prism in the case of such events. Whenever we receive many such attestations, we will simply ignore them if the target of the attestation is known to be old and not have been checkpointed in any chain. That is if we know for a fact that such attestations is either from struggling clients, in which case is anyway useless for the network, or it is for a chain that we have not yet seen. We maintain safety since we will process these as soon as we see them on chain. So this is sort of breakdown of what's happening. You know, it was these two individual softwares where the issues really happened. But it's not great. And then it said mainnet is not finalizing. Again, Prism is releasing a patch today. We'll keep you up to date. And then they go on to give you some of the solutions. So Tim Chenko and others say the loss of finality could have been avoided entirely if less than a third of all validators ran the same consensus layer software client. Currently, 2 clients, Prism and Lighthouse, are estimated to be operating a greater than a third of Ethereum nodes, according to clientdiversity.org. Ethereum's ecosystem led at Block Demon agrees. The fact that Ethereum does have multiple client implementations actually seems to have prevented the blockchain from halting. And if all consensus clients would have less than 33% of the network, the finalization delay would have been avoided. So this is actually a good thing. This is what I love to see, because there's a silver lining here in actually saying, well, let's take, let's decentralize in terms of software and likely validators as a result of this. So it's very interesting. Since blocks were still being produced, transactions were processed continuously, which is why end users didn't see much, if any, affected, he added. So aliveness over safety. In designing blockchains with proof of stake consensuses, developers have to make choices over how to prioritize one of 2 properties: safety and aliveness. Safety is thought of as avoiding bad things. That means every node in the network agrees constantly on the state of the chain. Ethereum prioritizes liveliness, which is thought of as a good thing happening eventually. The blockchain is designed to be very difficult to hold. And that's what we've seen. Then goes on to say, I developed a newfound appreciation for blockchain liveliness, especially LMD/Ghost fork choice. Since yesterday's instance, Ethereum didn't finalize for 3 epochs, which is just a period of time, in regards to when blocks should be produced, but it kept going. Users were barely affected or noticed the finality gap. The affected parties were the ones who were dependent on the chain's finalization. Layer 1 to layer 2 deposits took longer. If we had chosen strong safety over liveliness, the chain would have halted and the UX would have been far worse. So ultimately, guys, it's not a major issue. However, and this was thought about in Ethereum design, it is still somewhat of an issue. So blocks are still chugging along, just increase missed slots, longer finality delays than yesterday, inactive leak kicking in too slowly, but continuously incentivizing validators. Prism looks to push update soon. So there's actually an issue with some of the softwares that use to validate the Ethereum network. I thought this was a good video to get out because it just kind of shows, what problems can arise with these proof of stakes. And these are things you should pay attention to, because how do we end up being what everything is onboarded on if there are issues like this, which admittedly was a small issue at the time. There's a clear path ahead to fix it. But I could bet money on the fact that this isn't the first time or last that something like this has happened on proof of stake cryptos. So on that note, guys, I am going to love and leave you. Hopefully you guys are fully up to date with what actually happened with the Ethereum network. It's basically a silver lining, in my opinion, because they've rooted out problems. They're now calling for more decentralization in terms of software. And actually, it's a very good stress test, and not just for Ethereum, but other blockchains out there that maybe are looking to adopt similar methods. On that note, I'm going to love and leave you. If you've enjoyed the content, like us, appreciate it as a comment, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Thanks a lot for watching, ladies and gentlemen. See you in the next.